What if that perfect red carpet smile was the very thing we should have been most afraid of? What secrets hide behind the velvet ropes and gated estates, and how does charm turn into something poisonous? For every dazzling premiere there is a locked door where fame warps into hunger, where kindness becomes currency and cruelty is practiced in private. Some adored figures built reputations on warmth only to weaponize it. Others wore their darkness openly, thriving on the very outrage that would later undo them. These are not stories about talent so much as autopsies of image, each one asking the same cold question: why did we keep applauding after the mask came off? By the end, you might be left wondering something sharper. Is evil in this town an exception, or the price paid for the spotlight? 22. Sean Diddy Combs. For decades, Sean Diddy Combs stood as a living emblem of relentless ambition. As a producer, rapper, and fashion entrepreneur, he built a gilded brand that came to define a certain image of hip-hop luxury: the champagne, the yachts, the ability to elevate careers. He seemed to prove that hustle could remake a life, but beneath that gloss, a far darker narrative began to emerge. In the mid-2020s, a string of lawsuits and federal inquiries put his empire under intense scrutiny, and former associates came forward with allegations of coercion, sensitive matters, misconduct, and physical intimidation. Media accounts described searches of residences and the seizure of materials by authorities, while he repeatedly denied wrongdoing and characterized the claims as a concerted attack. As scrutiny intensified, some business partners and collaborators stepped away, and the figure once celebrated as a self-made icon was recast in many minds as a cautionary example. For countless people who had seen him as proof that talent and grit could rewrite fate, the revelations complicated that story, suggesting success can sometimes conceal troubling realities rather than erase them. 21. James Corden. For years, James Corden cultivated the image of the affable everyman, the buoyant, late-night host who could duet with pop stars and make Tinseltown feel like a friendly neighborhood bar. Viewers adored his warmth, his chuckle, the way he could make high-profile guests seem like old friends. Slowly, though, a different portrait took shape, sketched from whispered accounts, viral posts, and repeat stories from restaurants and sets that sounded too familiar to ignore. Tales of outbursts, barbs aimed at staff, and unpredictable moods began to circulate around Los Angeles. Servers recalled being belittled over small errors. Crew members described sudden mood swings and moments designed to humiliate. In an industry that trades in illusion, the blow landed hard. The nice guy facade might have been exactly that. He offered a public apology, yet the damage lingered. People were less angry about one isolated incident than about the realization that what felt sincere might have been staged. In the age of social media receipts, charm is a kind of currency, and when it is revealed as counterfeit, admirers quickly turn into critics. When he stepped away from his program, the ovation felt muted. Hollywood did not so much cancel him as exhale, relieved that the grin had left the stage. For the many who once took him as evidence that decency could coexist with fame, the mask had split, and the truth beneath was noticeably less charming. 20. Chris D'Elia. For years he was the comic everyone assumed would only go up. His charisma dominated rooms, his timing felt effortless, and the industry treated him like the next crossover star. Funny, handsome, unbearably confident. But that confidence masked something corrosive, and the act behind the mic began to look very different from what people had been laughing at. When leaked screenshots of private messages made the rounds, the carefree persona fractured. Young women, some barely out of high school, told of grooming, manipulation, and exploitation dressed up as flirtation. They described invitations to hotel rooms, mentorship promises that slid into coercion, and a performer who used visibility as a lure. He denied any controversial conduct, insisting he had done nothing illegal, yet the sheer weight of accounts altered public perception. Clubs pulled his dates, his reps cut ties, and a streaming special disappeared before it ever saw the light of day. The irony stung. He had once portrayed a predatory figure on television, unaware that reality would echo fiction so closely. In comedy, the truth is supposed to liberate. In this case, the truth became the joke. His fall was not a dramatic spectacle so much as a grimly ordinary unraveling, a reminder that the same charm that draws applause can also disarm those who trust it. Now his spotlight is diminished, audiences are smaller, and the remaining laughter carries the uncomfortable echo of what was made into comedy. 19. Drake Bell. He was Nickelodeon's golden boy, funny, musical, and disarmingly likable. For a generation of viewers, he was the soundtrack to afternoons, an emblem of harmless mischief and teenage charm. That warm nostalgia, however, curdled into shock when it emerged that the smiling figure many remembered had been living a very different private life. In the early years of the new decade, he faced court on charges of endangering a minor and distributing harmful material to a child. Prosecutors described disturbing online conversations with an underage admirer, showing how access and trust granted by celebrity can be manipulated into something predatory. He admitted guilt and accepted a plea arrangement that kept him out of prison, but the reputational damage was deep and lasting. The public response was immediate and painful. For those who grew up with him, the revelations felt like a betrayal of a personal history, turning childhood favorites into awkward relics. Subsequent efforts at reinvention, public apologies, attempts at a fresh start, even name changes, and new work only intensified the unease. His story now serves as a stark lesson about the vulnerability of fandom, the fragility of trust, and how fame can conceal troubling behavior. The once familiar boy next door became a haunting presence in the lives he had once brightened. 18. Jussie Smollett. He had been celebrated as a breakthrough figure, an openly gay black actor who brought nuance and visibility to prime time. His work on Empire made him a role model, someone whose success felt like progress for communities long sidelined by Hollywood. It was the kind of rise that suggested doors were finally opening. Then a single winter night changed everything. In the winter of 2019, he reported being the victim of a racist and homophobic assault in Chicago. The story ignited outrage and widespread sympathy until the police investigation produced evidence suggesting the attack had been staged and orchestrated by him for attention and career advantage. When a jury later convicted him of making false reports to law enforcement, the shock resonated beyond the courtroom. The harm felt less legal than personal, a betrayal of the trust and empathy that had propelled him. For many activists and fans, the episode turned hope into skepticism, leaving wounds that extended past one person. He continues to proclaim his innocence, but his reputation has been deeply scarred. What began as a plea for support became, in the eyes of many, a cautionary tale about self-inflicted damage and a reason for extra doubt when real victims come forward. 17. Ellen DeGeneres. For years, Ellen DeGeneres seemed to personify everything Hollywood wanted to believe about itself: approachable, generous, and relentlessly progressive. Her daytime program was comfort television, a familiar refuge where humor felt warm, and her signature exhortation to kindness showed up everywhere, from mugs to shirts to casual conversation. That carefully cultivated image began to crack in the latter part of the 2010s, when former staffers and employees came forward with accounts of a workplace governed by fear, favoritism, and humiliating treatment. Reports of bullying, verbal abuse, and intimidation punctured the friendly facade she had spent decades constructing. When she finally addressed the controversy on air, many viewers felt the response was rehearsed and too little too late. Audience numbers slipped, advertisers retreated, and her long-running show quietly ended after almost 2 decades. More than the cancellation, the sting was the sense of betrayal. She had not broken the law, yet she became a figure of widespread contempt because her fall exposed a harsher lesson that kindness marketed as a brand can become performance, and when the act stops, all that remains is an unsettling silence no laugh track can fill. 16. Joss Whedon. For years, Joss Whedon was celebrated as a creative force, the writer who introduced tough, complicated female leads, razor-sharp banter, and worlds where teamwork and heart mattered. He elevated cult favorites like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Firefly into touchstones and helped remake blockbuster filmmaking with The Avengers. Admirers treated him like proof that wit and compassion could coexist with authority. Yet behind the applause, a different story was unfolding. People who had worked with him began to tell similar, troubling accounts. They spoke of explosive outbursts that reduced actors to tears, mentorship that felt like manipulation, and sets governed by intimidation. An actress said she was body-shamed while pregnant. Others described prolonged emotional harm and control. The filmmaker who had scripted feminist heroes was accused by many of belittling and breaking the women who animated his creations. He rejected the accusations, arguing he was misunderstood, a brilliant but flawed artist under attack. Still, the accumulation of allegations left little room for easy myth-making. Studios pulled back, collaborators fell silent, and the once-adored auteur rapidly found himself widely shunned. The rueful part of his decline is not only that he lost stature, it forced fans to revisit the characters and ideals they had loved, and to confront the possibility that the person who taught them to fight monsters might himself have been causing real damage. 15. Scott Rudin. For years, Scott Rudin was synonymous with prestige, the producer behind lauded films such as No Country for Old Men and The Social Network, whose involvement signaled awards season potential. Inside the industry, he wielded influence like currency. His blessing could elevate careers, his fury could quiet them permanently. That reputation of ruthless effectiveness was long accepted as part of his genius. Then former assistants and colleagues began speaking out, painting a picture of relentless abuse. Accounts described objects hurled across offices, protracted tirades, and verbal assaults that left staff shaken and anxious just to be in his presence. The reports were strikingly uniform, not the occasional fiery outburst of a demanding artist, but a pattern of prolonged intimidation. He faced no controversial prosecution, yet his professional world unraveled as studios and theatrical producers pulled back and collaborators distanced themselves. The collapse was as dramatic as any script, forcing Hollywood to reckon with how often intimidation has been mistaken for leadership. In the end, his reputation did not fade because his taste failed, but because so much of his power depended on fear rather than respect. 14. David O. Russell. David O. Russell long embodied the archetype of the difficult genius, the director whose messy temperament was tolerated because his films Silver Linings, Playbook, American Hustle, the fighter felt alive with emotion and disorder. For a long time, Hollywood excused the volatility as part of the process, a price paid for the occasional triumph. But creative brilliance does not absolve harmful conduct. Over time, people who worked with him began to speak up, recounting furious outbursts, scenes of humiliation on set, and allegations of inappropriate physical contact. A widely circulated clip of a confrontation with Lily Tomlin crystallized the unease, and further accounts from family members and former collaborators suggested patterns of behavior that crossed professional lines. Russell has denied or minimized many of the claims, calling some incidents misunderstandings, yet the narratives took their toll. Projects stalled, some actors declined collaborations, and the sheen around his name dulled as audiences and studios grew less willing to overlook the cost of his methods. In the end, his legacy is not just the awards or ticket sales, but the lingering question about how often creative achievement was built on the discomfort of others. 13. Stephen Collins. For years, Stephen Collins stood for decency on screen. As the gentle patriarch on Seventh Heaven, he was television's moral center, steady, protective, endlessly patient. Viewers trusted him. Parents held him up as the kind of man they wanted their children to emulate. Then, in the year 2014, that reputation was shattered by a recording that felt like a betrayal of the deepest order. A leaked audio tape captured Collins speaking about inappropriate sensitive matters, contact with minors from years earlier. Hearing his own voice recount those actions with a chilling lack of remorse turned private suspicion into public certainty. This was not allegation alone. It was his own words laid bare, and the effect was immediate and brutal. His career unraveled swiftly. Reruns were pulled, representation ended, and the show that had once comforted families suddenly felt impossible to watch. Colleagues and fans alike struggled to reconcile the man they had admired with the admissions on the tape. Collins withdrew from the public eye and offered apologies that many found insufficient against the weight of what he had acknowledged. For those who had invited him into their homes through the screen, the collapse felt intensely personal, the idealized television father exposed as a profound betrayal. 12. Victor Salva. Victor Salva's career is one of Hollywood's most chilling contradictions. A filmmaker who made a name crafting on-screen nightmares while off-screen conduct mirrored the darkest themes of his work. As writer and director of Jeepers, Creepers, and Powder, he earned praise for unsettling, emotionally resonant films that lingered with viewers. Yet his early career was marred by a controversial conviction in the late 1980s for sexually abusing a 12-year-old actor during the production of his first feature. Investigators uncovered videotapes and explicit material that confirmed the charges. He served a prison sentence, but years later the industry quietly allowed him back into the fold. Studios financed his projects, distributors released them, and audiences continued to consume his work even as survivors watched his name return to screens. When the details resurfaced, it provoked renewed anger and stunned many who felt the system had prioritized profit over accountability. Salva insisted he had paid his debt and deserved to work again, but for many that defense fell flat. Every airing of Jeepers Creepers reignited the debate over separating art from the artist, and his continued presence came to symbolize a broader failure to hold powerful figures to account. In the end, he did more than make horror films. He became part of a real-life story that forced viewers to confront why Hollywood tolerated it. 11. Dan Schneider. For almost 20 years, he was the undisputed king of kids' television, the creator behind hits like iCarly, Drake, and Josh, and Victorious that paired slapstick with sincerity and made Nickelodeon must-see viewing. Families felt safe handing their children over to his shows. Young viewers found heroes and inside jokes to carry through childhood. His name in the credits once signaled harmless entertainment. Yet people who worked with him paint a very different picture. Former employees and cast members describe a workplace steered by intimidation, ego, and behavior that crossed professional lines. Scripts and camera directions, they say, frequently lingered on young performers' bodies and feet in ways that made staff uncomfortable, concerns executives largely brushed off. Crew members reported harsh verbal treatment and a climate of fear, while whispered accounts of inappropriate attention toward teenage actors circulated for years. When the network quietly severed their relationship, it was framed as an amicable split, but many took it as an acknowledgement that the rumors could no longer be contained. A recent documentary reopened wounds, giving voice to those who had felt silenced by power dynamics and contracts. He has denied any misconduct, dismissing some complaints as misread jokes, but for countless viewers, the glow of nostalgia is now tarnished. The laughter that once filled living rooms has been replaced by unease, a recognition that the shows that shaped so many childhoods were produced amid troubling conduct. 10. Jonathan Majors. Jonathan Majors seemed poised to become Hollywood's next great leading man, a performer whose talent was hard to ignore and whose intensity filled every frame. After standout work in Lovecraft Country, Creed III, and a commanding portrayal of Kang in the Marvel Pantheon, he was perched on the brink of superstardom. Critics invoked comparisons to Denzel Washington, and studios sketched out billion-dollar strategies around him. Then, in the spring of 2023, the image collapsed. He was arrested in New York following an altercation with his girlfriend, Grace Jabari, who accused him of assault and emotional abuse. Photographs of her injuries and testimony from witnesses suggested a pattern that many fans could no longer chalk up to rumor. A guilty verdict for assault and harassment may have kept him out of prison, but the court of public opinion was unforgiving. Marvel cut ties, endorsements disappeared, and lucrative projects disintegrated. What shocked people was less the allegation than the speed of the fall. Audiences had placed their hope in him, a new kind of complicated hero. And when that figure became a headline for violence, the sense of betrayal felt personal. Major's trajectory became a study in contradiction, forceful and controlled on screen, volatile and collapsing off it. Once viewed as Hollywood's future, in months he was remade into a cautionary example that talent can open doors, but character decides which ones stay open. 9. Marilyn Manson. For decades, he thrived on provocation, turning outrage into spectacle and rebellion into a kind of religion. His live shows were staged as Gothic tableau burning crosses, faux blood, a devoted crowd caught between terror and exhilaration. To many fans, he was not a villain but an act of liberation. Beneath the makeup and aphorisms, however, there was a darker private life that performance could not explain away. In the early part of the new decade, that facade began to splinter. Numerous women, among them actress Evan Rachel Wood, stepped forward with accusations of sensitive matters, assault, psychological abuse, and coercive control. Their accounts were harrowing. Stories of confinement, sleep deprivation, alleged branding, and threats that made the boundary between art and harm disturbingly unclear. He denied the claims, calling them consensual role play, but the similarities across testimonies were striking. The consequences were immediate and severe. Record labels, severed relationships, agencies and productions distanced themselves, and collaborators spoke openly about fear and manipulation. What made the collapse so uncanny was how neatly the allegations matched the persona he had long cultivated. The shock artist who once choreographed darkness found his own mythology turning on him, leaving a legacy now shadowed by the accusations. 8. Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey had long been the picture of cultivated menace, an actor whose quiet intensity and icy control could own a scene with a single look. With 2 Academy Awards and a career that spanned decades, he seemed untouchable. The face of American Beauty, the calculating Frank Underwood on House of Cards, a performer who made manipulation seem like a refined craft. Then the boundary between his parts and his life abruptly dissolved. In 2017, Anthony Rapp accused Spacey of sensitive matters misconduct that allegedly happened when Rapp was just 14. Almost immediately, a stream of additional accusations emerged from fellow actors, crew, and others who described a pattern of predatory behavior and emotional coercion. Projects stalled, Netflix severed ties, and his footage in All the Money in the World was entirely reshot at great expense, costing millions. The speed of his professional erasure shocked the industry as much as his former stature had. Spacey insisted he was innocent and fought civil suits and controversial charges on both sides of the Atlantic. Even where legal proceedings did not find him guilty, the courtroom outcomes mattered less than the chorus of allegations that had recast him from celebrated artist to a figure associated with abuse. Ultimately, his reputation and career never recovered, and the saga came to be seen as a grim echo of the on-screen manipulators he once so memorably played, a cautionary tale about power without empathy. 7. Roman Polanski. Roman Polanski was long revered as a cinematic genius. His work, Rosemary's Baby, Chinatown, the pianist reshaping genres with a blend of psychological dread and formal beauty. But his artistic reputation has been shadowed by a controversial case from 1977 when he was arrested after charges that he drugged and sexually assaulted a 13-year-old girl during a photo shoot at an actor's Los Angeles home. He pleaded guilty to unlawful sensitive matters, intercourse with a minor as part of a plea agreement, and fled the United States before sentencing, living in exile, while continuing to make films and receive honors in countries that would not extradite him. Hollywood remains bitterly divided. Some separate the artist from the controversy and continue to laud his films, while others see his continued acclaim as proof of the industry's moral failures. Each award or standing ovation reopens the wound, a reminder that brilliance and wrongdoing can coexist in uneasy tension. The Polanski case forces a central question about power and privilege in the film world. Can artistic achievement ever outweigh the harm done, or does applause risk excusing what no camera can justify? 6. Mel Gibson. He was once the very image of a Hollywood hero, tough, principled, and larger than life. From the adrenaline of the Lethal Weapon films to the sweeping drama of Braveheart, his intensity read as authenticity. As a filmmaker, he provoked awe with The Passion of the Christ, a work that cast him as a visionary with moral certainty. But the persona concealed a volatile temper and prejudices that repeatedly surfaced. In 2006, a drunk driving arrest and the anti-Semitic outburst that followed cracked the facade. Later, leaked recordings of confrontations with his former partner, Oksana Grigorieva, revealed racist and misogynistic language and threats that further eroded public goodwill. For a time, he receded from the center of Hollywood, his reputation burned by his own words. A directorial comeback with Hacksaw Ridge earned awards attention and tentative praise, yet the sense of true contrition never fully settled. What many came to resent was not merely the anger but the contradiction. A man who portrayed redemption and sacrifice on screen but struggled to live up to those ideals off it. 5. R. Kelly. His voice once felt like salvation. With songs like I Believe I Can Fly and Ignition Remix, he scored weddings, graduations, and Sunday mornings across the country and was crowned the king of R&B, a figure whose velvet tone and swagger defined an era. But beneath the hits, a darker reality was building, one that would shatter the image of genius and entitlement alike. For years there were whispers. Teenage girls controlled, secret marriages, hush settlements. In the 90s, he illegally married singer Aaliyah when she was 15, using forged papers to conceal the truth. Lawsuits and accounts soon accumulated, each telling variations of the same story: manipulation, confinement, and abuse behind closed doors. The music world mostly looked away, too invested in the catalog to confront the crimes. The confrontation came in the late 20-teens with the explosive documentary Surviving R. Kelly, as survivors described, years of terror and a lifestyle run like a cult. By 2021, he was convicted in federal court of sex trafficking and racketeering, accused of running a controversial enterprise built on coercion. Additional convictions followed, and he is now serving lengthy prison terms. The artist who once seemed untouchable sits silenced, his legacy forever stained. His rise and fall expose more than one man's depravity. They reveal an industry and a culture that danced while victims cried out. 4. O.J. Simpson. O.J. Simpson once seemed to embody the American dream. A record-shattering athlete turned movie actor and advertising favorite, charming, articulate, and widely admired by anyone who watched him blaze across a field or light up a commercial. He came to represent victory, success, and the seductive idea that fame could sanctify ambition. Then, in the summer of 1994, that image was torn apart by blood. When he was charged in the deaths of his former wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ronald Goldman, the country stopped to watch. The prosecution pointed to DNA evidence, bloodied gloves, and a trail of violence, yet the courtroom became something else entirely: theater. The so-called trial of the century played out live in living rooms across the nation, pitching celebrity against the quest for justice. When a jury acquitted him, the verdict left millions celebrating and millions devastated. A civil jury would later hold him financially liable for their deaths, and later legal troubles, including a conviction for armed robbery and kidnapping, only deepened the sense that his acquittal had left a moral void. He remains a polarizing symbol, proof that in Hollywood persona can shield and distort, and that under the bright lights, truth often fights to be heard. 3. Bill Cosby. For half a century he was cast as America's father. The Cosby Show transformed television, mixing warmth and wit while offering a picture of black achievement that resonated nationwide. He spoke publicly about morals, education, and responsibility, and to many he seemed proof that decency could be funny, a comforting national voice. Yet behind that public persona, he was living one of the darkest double lives in entertainment. For years, women quietly told similar stories: drinks that left them woozy, gaps in memory, mornings that felt wrong. Each allegation echoed the others, a pattern of manipulation and violation that became harder to dismiss. Still, for a long time, Hollywood and much of the public treated the claims as rumor or opportunism, unwilling to believe the man they trusted could be a predator. In 2015, court records made public included an admission by him about using sedatives during sensitive matters encounters. In the years that followed, more than 60 women came forward with accusations, and in 2018 he was convicted of aggravated indecent assault and sentenced to prison. The image of him led away in custody was a cultural rupture, the father figure stripped of authority. Although that conviction was later overturned on a procedural ground in 2021, his reputation is permanently shattered. His story is not only one of hypocrisy, but of a vast betrayal of trust, poisoning the idea of safety for countless people who once looked to him as a moral model. 2. Harvey Weinstein. For decades he reigned over the industry from behind a lineup of tuxedos and awards, shaping careers as co-founder of Miramax and the Weinstein Company. His approval opened doors, his displeasure shut them. To many in Hollywood, he was more than a producer. He was the arbiter of who would be seen and who would be sidelined, and that power created a culture in which access often felt transactional. That veneer was shattered in October of 2017 when investigative pieces in the New York Times and the New Yorker cataloged decades of allegations. Dozens of women, from junior assistants to celebrated actresses, came forward with eerily similar accounts of unwanted advances, coercion, and assault. What had been a network of rumors became an overwhelming chorus: meetings in isolated hotel rooms, career threats for refusal, and hush payments to silence victims. His institutions and alliances disintegrated almost overnight. Companies faltered, confidants distanced themselves, and the industry that had long protected him confronted its complicity. Out of that upheaval arose a broader movement demanding accountability and change across entertainment and beyond. Legal judgments followed. In 2020, he was convicted in New York of serious allegations and sensitive matters assault and given a sentence of more than 20 years. A separate Los Angeles trial added 16 additional years. He is now behind bars, and the most enduring part of his legacy is not the films he helped produce, but the reckoning he forced on an entire generation. 1. Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was more than a pop star. He became a living legend. From a boy performing with his brothers to an album that dominated the planet, he transformed music and reimagined fame. His voice crossed genres, his movement seemed to defy anatomy, and his persona, the moonwalking, softly spoken king of pop, felt untouchable. Yet alongside that genius grew a level of public obsession matched by equally intense revulsion. He was not only the most famous person on earth, but one of the most polarizing. In the early years of the 1990s, allegations surfaced that young boys had been abused at his Neverland ranch. He resolved at least one civil claim with a confidential payment, which only deepened the rumors that money had muted the truth. A later controversial trial resulted in an acquittal, but the accusations continued to cast a long shadow. After his death, new films, most notably Leaving Neverland, brought fresh, harrowing testimony from men who said they had been manipulated for years. His estate and many defenders denied those accounts with ferocious intensity. The public cleaved into opposing camps. For some, he remained a prey of extortion, an innocent creative ruined by suspicion. For others, he was a predator shielded by wealth and superstardom. No legal outcome could fully settle that divide. No explanation could quiet the question. Each time a familiar hook plays on the radio, the dilemma resurfaces: can the art exist apart from the artist, or are they forever entwined? Michael Jackson's legacy is a contradiction etched into modern culture. The man who taught millions to believe in spectacle also forced them to confront the fragility of innocence. In the end, his most enduring creation may not be a record or a routine, but the unending riddle of who he truly was. Fame in this place is never unsullied. It shines like silver glass and eats at the edges, beautiful until it fractures. It seduces and then consumes, turning ovation into a kind of permission. Each name we have followed once meant something: luminous craft, triumph, the power to move others, and each came to show what happens when influence is left to its own devices. Behind flashes and pours of champagne, the same pattern repeats. Devotion becomes a shield, and a shield becomes decay. The industry does not so much birth monsters as teach them to vanish in plain sight. For long seasons, charm and money bought silence, building a sanctuary of denial. But lacquer peels, confidences leak, and audiences who once mistook polish for truth begin to demand the human face beneath the gloss. These lives are more than scandal. They are cautionary sermons about the price of fame. Some betrayed trust, some lied, some were undone by arrogance, and some were swept up and broken by a system that rewarded spectacle. Together, they sketch a relentless symmetry. The higher the stage, the harder the fall. When the lights collapse and the applause dissolves, what remains is not legend, but echo, a subtle, insistent reminder that celebrity does not cleanse wrongdoing, it magnifies it. The studios will keep setting their glare, but in the half-light behind the glamour, those long shadows will never stop moving.